resources. Let's be honest.
No. Is anybody on our critical incident team?
Yep, I am.
Yeah.
But what I would say to that, and not to, I mean, I think the concept is good.
I agree.
However, personally, if it were me and I needed to talk to somebody, I wouldn't be going to the critical team. I'd be going to somebody that I know that has been there, done that, and is going to be empathetic to me. Yeah. I mean, as a field training officer, I tell the new guys all the time, I said, you know what, you are going to experience some of these things. Find somebody that you trust that's gonna hold what you say in confidence. It's going to give you some good advice. Find somebody like that and talk to. And I mean, with at least for my department, with the team, and a lot of good people on the team. However, most of the people on that team or a lot of them have been off the street for a while sometimes, and are a little bit, I think, divorced from the street culture. And for a new guy to come and say, man, I just saw this this kid who got beat to death by his parent or something like that, and they're not really going to know how to respond except for the textbook way,
right?
So,
I mean, I think there's, like you said, the concept. I think
the concept is
valid.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would find it difficult. I would find it very difficult to go to guys that are either in uniform or have been detached from uniform that are involved in this team, right, and talk about what I saw and how I felt about it. I mean, I've been in law enforcement long enough to get that. We fuck with each other pretty hard. So, some of the guys that are fucking with one another, and then we come in after an incident, and you want me to open up
right.
about this stuff. And, our training and background, I mean, like you said, the concept's great. But
in theory,
yeah. And there are individuals at, our department that I wouldn't have an issue with talking to about stuff and being like, you want to know what, this really bothered me. This was an issue for me.
But I think I would talk to them because of who that individual is.
Exactly.
Not because they're a member of the team. And I think that's where the concept kind of degrades to some extent.
And we've done the debriefs and stuff like that.
But which are typally a disaster in every organization.
Yeah.
In the military, it's the same way.
Yeah.
But you seek out people that you trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's who you're going to talk to.
Yeah.
And I think that's what maybe our biggest downfall is. We don't have small networks of trust. You know what I mean? And guess what? The person you trust may not even be the guy that works the same side of town as you. And that's tragic. It shouldn't
really
be that
is,
way.
Yeah.
But how do you create those networks? That's the change in the culture that we're talking about. Being able to have those pockets where you've got, let's say, a sergeant in charge of a network of 6 or 7 guys that trust each other, and they trust that sergeant to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're going to give you what you need. You're going to go talk to somebody sitting behind a desk that, they try as they might.
Yeah.
Their
it's an honest effort.
It is, but is it going to do the job?
Yeah.
Probably not.
No.
Yeah, I think across the country that, critical incident teams comprised mostly of police officers was in response to guys going through critical incidents and saying, I don't want to talk to a psychologist. They don't know what I'm going through.
Right.
They haven't done the work.
Sure.
So law enforcement's solution was, okay, well, we'll bring in other guys from the department who are well respected, who are willing, whatever, and we'll make that. But cops should not be administering care. That's not what we're built for. That's not what we're supposed to do. And just like you said, you don't want to tell some guy in confidence something that you're going through and then 2 years later have it come up during a coffee stop, or because that's just the way cops are. So I think that's something we have to bridge. We have to find a way to get guys to open up to people, in order to prevent PTS from becoming PTSD. But I don't know that it should be cops unless unless they're trained in psychology or traumatology or whatever. So, and as far as it being available, I don't know right now if you took, you're on the team, but at your average police department, I don't know, or sheriff's department, I don't know how many guys would know, okay, so if you're in an officer-involved shooting, or if you see some kid decapitated by her father, what's available to you as a resource? I don't know how many guys could answer that question thoroughly enough. I don't know how many supervisors could answer that. No. Again, the desire, it seems like, is to just say, well, we have an employee assistance program for that,
right? So
we're going to direct them, that way. But and then I said it, and I believe that cops should not be administering care. That critical incident team from any department ought to be just there to kind of maybe help with an initial debrief and then get them to to professional help. But to try to confuse cops with psychological caregivers, I think is kind of muddying the waters.
Well, I think what you're saying, you got a good point, but that's actually what the critical team is comprised of. It's comprised of police officers and also of professional psychologists. Our department has brought in some of those people. So that's like when you have a team, you're going to have 2 or 3 cops and 1 or 2 professional counselors.
So where's the hitch?
So
why do we have problems? I mean, and you give a great perspective on this. Is it how come a cop doesn't feel comfortable necessarily going to the team? Step number one, going to the team, and then step number 2, if it's necessary, getting psychological help. Is it a stigma? Is it?
I think it's part of the part of the cop culture. I think. I mean, because you look at police work, and police are the guys who break up the fights or fight the bad guy and put cuffs on the bad guy and take him away. It's a very macho type of culture, and for someone to go and say, hey, you know what, I can't get this image out of my mind. I was on the scene. I keep having these reoccurring dreams, and I can't get this out of my head, is to kind of suggest to admit some type of weakness. That way, some people look at it, to admit that I'm having a problem with something is to admit weakness, and nobody wants to do that in this culture.
Right. So
Cops are supposed to have the answers.
So what should change?
Right. That's the question.
Well, I think the culture,
we have all the questions, it's not the answers.
I think the culture should change. I think that we have this that perspective. You're saying this is weakness. This isn't weakness. This is how you do your job professionally. And this mental capacity that we're talking about is just the biggest part of it, and yet we ignore it so much. And why can't we just sit down and there is a stigma against it. If you're going to go sit on a couch, there's something wrong with you. Not necessarily. There might be something wrong with you if you refuse to go sit on that couch, because then it's going to turn into what we talked about earlier, this crisis point where you should have gotten help a long time ago, and
right.
Why didn't you? After the fact, why didn't you? Oh, because I didn't want to get made fun of. That's really not going to hold up. It's not going to help you sleep, number one.
Well, like any problem in law enforcement or anywhere else, leadership has to be part of the solution. Leadership has to be part of the solution. So we have to start preparing our leaders to look at the guys who work for them and say, when you recognize this is an issue, it has to be addressed. This is not negotiable. This is not something you could ignore or pass on to someone else. We have to, kind of like in the military.
And it's a valid issue.
It's a completely valid issue.
It's legitimate.
But I don't know that people, again, there's this fear of it, it's kind of this taboo thing. But I think the military does a pretty good job of making leaders responsible for the people that work for them, immediately work. But in law enforcement, we don't always do that. We don't always hold leaders accountable for the people, for their subordinates, So we have to do a better job. And we have to make the leaders accountable for the mental health of the guys that work for them. Not to administer care. You don't have to be there. You don't have to sit them down on your own couch and talk to them. But you have to recognize.
Know where they're at.
You have to know where they're at, recognize that there's a problem, and then you have to arrange for them to get help. You can't just expect that they're going to do it on their own. You may have to lead them to water.
Yep. The biggest issue I see with a lot of these debriefs and these post incidents that we go through is the individuals who are involved. I mean, our cities, they've done their part to provide psychologists and therapists for us if we need it. But I have a difficulty talking to somebody who an hour prior to talking to me, they had a meeting with the guys from the waterworks because they're all upset because they're having issues with their job. What we deal with is very unique to us. So a city psychologist or a city team that's implemented, I don't think that shows a focal point to kind of our uniqueness within our own culture, within our own career. So we sit there. I've been through a handful of debriefs in the last couple of years, and I watch what's going on, and the reaction from these team psychologists, they're more surprised with what we're saying, and kind of how we're talking amongst ourselves and being able to actually provide actual care for us and jump in actively in the conversation, because I just don't think they're exposed to it as much as we are. I mean, obviously, but
they're getting vicarious trauma from listening to us talk about what we go through.
Talk about what we just saw, and they're like, "Holy shit, what happened?" I'm like, they don't understand it because they don't deal with it all the time.
I wonder.
It's a unique situation for people within mental health to, I think, deal with law enforcement.
I mean, there have been a number of people who have left law enforcement and gone on to get advanced degrees in psychology or counseling. I wonder if that's something in American law enforcement that we could get better at. We're trying to push people, I think, toward education, toward advanced degrees, people already in law enforcement. If we could work to identify and promote people into a position where they could work on advanced degrees in psychology, so that we could kind of solve that problem. So you've got guys who have done the job, who have the law enforcement pedigree, but yet they go on to get an advanced degree, paid for by the department, sponsored by the department, and then at some point, they can move into a capacity of being a counselor for guys. I don't think that's not even something on our radar. I mean, I know, and this is anecdotal, but we've tried to get more people to work on their master's degree. Our department. I suspect that a lot of departments
in business
are that
organization,
way. Right? Yeah,
organizational management,
right. And I wonder if we'd be better served by having those people work on a master's in counseling, social work, psychology, whatever. You know what I mean? I think that would be more beneficial to us.
You really want to dive into the pool of all the law enforcement officers head within our own department?
No. That's why I was trying to make it as broad as possible.
I'm not talking personally.
It's a good idea for somebody else.
One of you guys would be great, but I don't know about me.
Yeah.
No, but I think there are enough guys that would be interested in that, who've already got their bachelor's, who have their education.
It's unique.
Yeah,
Extremely
absolutely.
unique.
And I mean, just about every, I shouldn't say every, but there are a lot of sheriff's departments, municipal departments, whatever, that have access to universities, satellite campuses, where I'm sure they could establish a rapport, and then even work to create a program for guys that are interested in doing it. But I think that would solve the problem of cops being trained in order to administer care, so they could actually do that.
That's a good point. I mean, I think most cops would much rather talk to a professional counselor who has been a cop. Because I think that's the biggest hurdle for most cops. Is it's like, you go to a professional counselor, it's like, you have no idea what I've seen. You have no idea. You've never been in a situation one time in your life that I've been in the last 5. In the last 5 days, I've been in a situation multiple times. You've never been in a similar situation once.
Again tomorrow.
Exactly. You've never been there. So how are you supposed to tell me how to feel?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest hurdle that most cops have, is why talk to somebody who cannot relate to what I'm dealing with. It would kind of seem like a moot point, I think, to most cops.
Well, I mean,
that sounds like a good solution, though. I mean, if you had a counselor who had the credentials or the know-how to offer some of these coping mechanisms and strategies to develop normalcy within the drama of police work, probably could be real effective.
And I look at it just as, we're worried about, chiefs and sheriffs all across the country are worried about liability. They're worried about civil liability. They're worried about risk for the department. They're worried about the Department of Justice, or tort claims, lawsuit, whatever. And it seems to me that if we took more time, if we invested more in guys' mental health, if we made sure that the men and women who are doing this job are more balanced, that they process the things that they've experienced, that they would be more professional. There'd be a reduced risk of them getting wrapped up in bad decision making, or an error in judgment under stress or whatever. But I don't think there's that connection yet. I don't think that people are making the link between, good mental health equals better decision making, and better decision making protects us all, protects our image, protects us legally, all those things.
It's a new concept of law enforcement.